Shalom from Karen Biavna. At the beginning of the Parsha, we find ourselves well into the redemption after all HaKadosh Baruch Hu's miracles, after the Eser Makot, and we're on our way towards the Midbar, towards Eretz Yisrael. But then Paroh decides to change his mind and he runs after the Jewish people, and we have Paroh in back of us and Yamsuf in front of us, and we don't know what to do. Reaction is understandably fright and panic. You find, points out the Ramban, somewhat of a contradiction in the Psukim with respect to the spiritual level of the Jewish people at the time. On one hand, the Pasuk says, Vayiru'u me'od, vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael el Hashem. Jewish people call out to God, they pray. Very understandable, worthy, proper reaction. But the very next pasuk says, "Vayamru al Moshe hamibli ein kvarim b'Mitzrayim lekachtanu lamus b'midbar." Jewish people, they start complaining to Moshe Rabbeinu. Why did you get us into this mess? So that latter pasuk would seem to indicate that the Jewish people were on somewhat of a low spiritual level if they start complaining to Moshe Rabbeinu. How to resolve these two psukim? On one hand, davening, on the other hand, complaining to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Ramban deals with this and has four approaches. We'll cite them briefly and like to comment particularly on the fourth approach. The first approach suggested by the Ramban is that in fact there were different groups. There was one group, Bnei Yisrael, the higher level, that in fact called out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the proper thing to do. But then there were others that were complaining against Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the first approach. The second approach, the Ramban suggests, is that perhaps they did believe in God, but they had less confidence in Moshe Rabbeinu. Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu was doing things in an improper, unwise fashion. Thirdly, the Ramban suggests that V'yitz'aku, although at times does have a connotation of tefillah, but could also mean to complain, to kvetch, and perhaps V'yitz'aku b'nei Yisrael el Hashem could be understood over here as complaining. Fourthly, and on this I'd like to focus for a bit, the Ramban suggests that there were two stages. Initially, in fact, the Jewish people davened, and presumably, the Ramban understands, their tefillah was that the Mitzrim should decide to go home. The Mitzrim should go back to their initial decision to send the Jewish people, but that didn't happen. They prayed for the Mitzrim to go back, to turn back, and the Mitzrim didn't do that. They continued to run after the Jewish people. And the conclusion that the Jewish people came to is that apparently God has forsaken them. God doesn't care. And then, once that took place, so the Yetzer Hara got the best of them, they gave up, and they decided to complain about Moshe Rabbeinu, complained about the whole situation. In reality, though, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did listen to their tefillos and was planning on giving them a very wonderful, dramatic solution for this problem with the splitting of the sea. But the Jewish people, they understood that the Yeshua was meant to come about in a different fashion. So when the Yeshua came about, when the Yeshua did not come about in the fashion they expected, they started to complain. We need to keep in mind that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what He's doing, and the fact that our salvation doesn't come about in the way that we might have expected does not mean that our tefillos are being rejected. Quite possibly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has wonderful surprises in mind. Rabbi Friedman relates the story of a certain fellow that was a locksmith that moved to Lakewood, and he wanted business. So what does he do? Puts up notices in the shuls, takes out ads in the newspaper, prints cards. Nothing happens. At some point, though, he gets a phone call. Some fellow asks him, I think I found a wallet of yours. Fellow says, well, I don't remember losing a wallet, but hey, okay, I'll pick it up. We'll see what it is. So he comes, and he sees the wallet that was found, and he starts laughing. Fellow says, what's so funny? He says, oh, this is my kid's wallet. I gave him some of my cards, some old, no longer valid credit cards, and that's what you found. I had a couple of dollars. Oh, by the way, the fellow says, you're a locksmith? He says, yeah. Why do you ask? He says, oh, I'm a contractor. I'm a builder. I'm building now a large construction complex. Maybe you could put in the locks in those doors. Keep you busy for quite a while. And the fellow had business. So hey, often the Yeshua comes about in unexpected fashion. Certainly, if there's one thing which we learned over the last number of years, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has his own way of running things, and all sorts of surprises, and sometimes wonderful surprises that we weren't aware of, that we wouldn't have dreamt of. So certainly, when we're in a hard place, we are allowed to, and meant to, daven for Yeshua, to hope for Yeshua, and perhaps in a sense, expect that Yeshua will come. We should always keep in mind that it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the end of the day that writes the script. Have a wonderful Shabbat.